Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I will be your moderator tonight. My name is Evanique, for those that don't know. Tonight we are here to welcome Miku. Jing is going to give the introduction, and then Miku's going to have a presentation, and then we're going to have a question and answer period after that. I ask while Miku and Jing is talking that everybody goes on mute. That way we can have the best sound quality. And then once they're done talking, we'll have a question and answer period. So with that, Jing, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, let's welcome Miku to join us. Miku is my yoga teacher for last couple of years, especially during COVID. She was leading the yoga group in Seattle, then she moved to Hawaii. Even when she lives in Hawaii right now, she still lead us, through the Zoom. And it's such a pleasure. We built a strong community with her, and we're practicing mostly every day during the week. And this really gave us a lot of peace in mind. So I think Miku's experience is very unique, and based on our Design Your Life, theory, I think she really designed her own life in a very unique way. She was able to do a community housing, I think, in Seattle area. Then she suddenly decided to move to Hawaii. Then she started to build community in Hawaii and doing a lot of environmental related things. We just talked about they're trying to help with the recent fire disaster, and build local community, trying to have community-based response team. I think what she do is quite inspiring. So I hope with her presentation, we all can benefit from her experience, which can inspire us how to design our own life with mindfulness. Let's present Miku.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jean, and thank you everybody for having me here today. I'm actually so used to speaking to a Hawaii audience, so normally I would say aloha mai kako, hello everyone. And so I'm based out of, right now I'm based out of Honolulu, Hawaii. So that's where I am now, and Jean did a great job with introduction. I just wanted to share a little bit about what I'll be talking about. What I'll do is I'll just give you a little bit of background, a little bit more background about me and teachers and influences I've had in my life. We'll talk a little bit about this mindfulness in general, and kind of my approach to mindfulness and meditation. And then, as Jean said, I have been very mindfully, consciously designing, is a good word, designing my life and how to bring in the aspects of my life that I'm most passionate about. We'll talk a little bit about that, because for me the philosophy of mindfulness actually relates to life purpose and gift, actually. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I was hoping that we could actually do a little bit of a mindfulness practice together. So near the end, we'll have an invitation to just do a short 5 to 7 minute meditation, and then you can really experience some of the things that I'll be speaking about. So I didn't put together a PowerPoint, but I have a whole bunch of things to share, because I thought that would be more interesting in this Zoom format for you guys to look at while I'm sharing. So I'm going to screen share here. So first, I just wanted to share a little bit about my background. I have been teaching yoga, and yoga is actually something that's more recent to my life. I grew up in a meditation and like mindfulness tradition, so I've been meditating since I was like 7 years old. That's just kind of how my mom raised me. I did apprentice with Carroll Desselle. He's a clinical psychiatrist practicing in the Washington area for 7 years, and that's actually what really helped me cultivate my meditation practice into a teaching practice. But I also have my 200-hour yoga teacher training, and this is just a picture. So I teach outdoor sunset yoga, online Zoom yoga. It's like I teach permaculture in the park. I teach it at work, or not permaculture, but sorry, this is a permaculture convergence. I teach yoga at convergences of people. I teach yoga Green Lake as part of a warm-up for a woman's run for hundreds of people, or yoga in a sling, right? So part of what I'm kind of sharing is that as much as I can, I bring it into all the spaces that I practice in. And then I also teach meditation. So right now I'm part-time, I guess say part-time meditation teacher on top of my normal job at the Still and Moving Center in Kakako here in Hawaii. And do you know all the classes that go through that center are free, and they're online and they're available to everybody. But just wanted to give you sort of a sampling. So my the host there calls me a non-denominational teacher. So that means I draw from many different traditions. So I've taught meditation on the Tao. I've worked with my Hawaii teachers here to create like a Hawaii love meditation series, mindfulness with trees, so tree meditation. Worked with another teacher and colleague of mine in a ahimsa truth meditation, focusing on Gandhi's philosophy, Gayatri mantra, chi sensitizing. So a whole host of many different styles of meditation. And this is in part because I've been really blessed to have many different teachers from many different styles. So I just wanted to make sure that I named those. And some of them are traditional indigenous teachers. And I was lucky to be part of a newsletter, I guess, for one of the grandmothers that I work with. And we interviewed all of them. So I have them, you know, it's really amazing. I have their stories and interviews, and this is one of them, and I could share some of these links a little bit later, but especially Dr. Fariba Intishari, she's a Rumi philosopher. Auntie Hazel, she has a Quaker background. This is Carroll Desselle, who I worked with, and then grandmother Sarah, and then maybe one of my biggest influences is grandmother Karina. I also work with another Coast Salish teacher and dear friend of mine named Paul Chokitan Wagner, and he's the one that I've studied flute with. So I just always want to name my teachers and those who've come before me on this journey. And I'm gonna, if anyone's curious to read about their stories, I'm gonna put that link into the chat so that you guys can read those if you would like. So that's a little bit about my background. And so yeah, kind of want to take a moment to talk about meditation and mindfulness and what that means. And I'll stop screen sharing here, but I'll come back to a few different things. Is that? Yeah, we'll do that, and we'll talk a little bit about how I've kind of integrated that into my life a bit more. But okay, so first thing, I have some questions for you all. I want to kind of gauge the experience levels of you all. So if you have done meditation before, can you either raise your hand or do a little emoji or something, or indicate in the chat. So I've got Jean. I know Jean's done meditation before. And Sabrina, okay, so you've tried before. Lucy, I think I heard Laura say that she's some experience with it. Okay. So yeah, okay, so some familiarity. Meditation, okay, and Evanique, so you guys have some experience with this. So meditation is, you know, there's many different styles. I've guided many different styles, but I see meditation is our kind of intense practice, our concentrated practice of mindfulness, where mindfulness itself, the way I think of mindfulness, is about cultivating choice and cultivating the observer. So where does choice come in? Well, in order for us to calm ourselves down, say even just to meditate, in order to sit down and meditate, you have to be able to have choice. You have to have a moment in your life where you think, oh, I'm gonna stop my normal routine of that monkey mind spinning over and over and over again, and actually take a pause to sit down to practice being in some kind of stillness or some kind of conscious focus. There needs to be choice. And mindfulness is like that moment that you choose to pause and come into stillness, except it's like that for every moment of the day. That's mindfulness. So mindfulness is at least for me, at every moment of the day, having access to choice, to notice the script in our minds, to notice how we're standing, to notice how we're communicating, to notice how we're carrying ourselves in the world. And in order to have choice, we need to be in our parasympathetic nervous system. If you're in your fight-flight system, usually we don't have access to be able to slow down and take that moment to pause and reflect. So you need choice in order to access the observer. And I really encourage what I call a compassionate observer. People sometimes think like more of an objective observer, and that what that means is, so maybe I have a mindfulness practice. What that means is some part of me is observing me and giving me some feedback, right? So if I want to show up in the world with more generosity of spirit, or maybe even just to not be as stressed, or maybe just to not experience anxiety, right? There needs to be some part of me that notices when I'm experiencing stress, when I'm experiencing anxiety, when I, read news on my phone, right? Or however you get your news. What kind of emotions does that bring up in you? And how does reading things about disasters, for example, or challenging things, how does that affect your day and how you go about your day? And even just your body, like if you have your observer online, you might notice your body tensing up when you read things or hear things that are really challenging. You might notice your heartbeat quickening or a little bit of a shortness of breath. And it's important to be able to notice those things so that we can then choose to invite our bodies to slow down. Come back into that deeper breath. Come back into that more expansive access of our full faculties of our mind, brain, heart, body. So that's why choice is really important. And the interesting thing is sometimes we might observe ourselves, but then judge ourselves. That's the thing about observing. So you might observe that you're tightening up your body. You might observe that your mind keeps swirling a million miles a minute, or when you try to be in stillness, you keep having thoughts, and then you follow those thoughts, and then suddenly you're doing your grocery list and planning out your whole week because you had this half hour. So you're like using that half hour to be productive, and suddenly you lost the whole point of it. And so we need to have the observer so we can notice when those things are happening and then invite the body, the self, the mind back into that space. And meditation has many, many goals. So for some people, are just trying to relax. Some people are trying to let their mind take a break. Some people practice what's called insight meditation, where you try to create your kind of like a blank canvas, and then you allow certain insight to arise. So in some ways, at least the way I teach or practice mindfulness, it's not always just about stillness. It's about returning to the intention that you set. So having clear intentions is really important. So when you go sit down to meditate, or you're going about your day, what is your intention? And that's a question for all of you. As you're showing up in the world, maybe just day to day, what is your intention for how you wish to show up? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to respond when hard things happen? That's the real one. When difficulty arises in your own life, how do you respond? And how do you wish to respond? And that's the intention piece. So we need choice. We need to be able to observe so that we can shift and come closer to that intention. And we do need the intention to start with. So those are some of the elements that are really present when I am teaching about or practicing mindfulness. And again, mindfulness is like that choice point for every single moment of the day, not just that 30 minutes or 10 minutes you sit down to meditate. Okay, so how does that choice, you have an intention for how you want to live your life. You're noticing yourself, so you're trying to realign maybe every chance that you are noticing. How does that relate to your purpose? And I was saying that it does. If you can align your intention for how you want to show up in the world with your purpose, your gift, what it is that you're trying to do here on this planet, it becomes even more powerful. And so I'll offer my own example and kind of how I've designed my life to reinforce spaces for me to practice this. So here on my wrist, let's see, you can see it. There's a little red ribbon. And this ribbon is my reminder to my purpose, my commitment. And that's, some of you may have heard of this term, the red road, possibly. I'm not going to unpack it if you haven't heard it, but I have a commitment in my life to walking what I call the way of the sacred, to honoring life and to practicing being in harmony and in service to life and all beings. And that is part of my purpose. That's like what I've arrived at. And each one of you will have a different, a different gift or a different purpose, of course. But for me, the mindfulness practice helps support me living this life, living this path. And I always keep this little string to remind myself, because life is busy, life is unpredictable. There's car crashes and disasters and, wonderful things, weddings and new children. Life has so much life in it. But how do we keep remembering? That's sort of that question. It's so easy to forget. How do you keep remembering that you have a practice or that you have an intention and that you're trying to show up in a certain way? And so, well, I have this little thing. And in every photograph, I'm like, oh, yep. It's a small little thing that reinforces. People do all kinds of things, put your affirmation on your mirror, right? Some people make tattoos, like little symbolic things that they can always see. But being able to have something to help you remember is helpful. So for me, it's to walk this path of the red road and to practice being in compassion. That's really important to me. And what I do is, again, I said I've been blessed to work with many teachers. And one of the things they say is, like, you need to practice. This is their advice. This is when I did one of the interviews for the people of the world. Like, you need a practice to help yourself come back to center when you lose it. And because the world's becoming more chaotic, more complex, more challenging, I was chatting with people about this. I'm a resilience researcher. That's part of what I do for my day job. It's more important than ever that we create practices to help us come back to our centeredness. But the only way they work is if you've left your centeredness. So that's why we need the observer. I call it wobbling better, right? We are in this constant, tightrope walk, and we're wobbling, and we want to create practices to help us come back into balance. We have to notice that, whoa, I didn't realize I was walking sideways on this tightrope for like 10 days. Okay, I need to bring myself back into it. So that's really important. And there's many ways to do that, but one of the ways is to bring it into your life as much as possible. So for me, every morning, and this is what my teachers will say this, like, you need a practice, can be any practice. Every morning, the first thing I do before I get out of bed, before my feet hit the ground, is I raise my hands in gratitude. And this is actually taught to me by one of my traditional indigenous teachers from the Northwest. I raise my hands in gratitude and I say, Temklashla, Creator, thank you for one more day. That's it. That's that small. But every morning, every single morning, I do that. And I hit my alarm, sit up. It has to be quiet because my husband's usually still sleeping. And I say this, then I get out of bed. And part of this is creating what I call a sacred morning practice or a sacred evening practice, and then finding ways to bring it into your workday. So that, like, for every moment you can get, you bring this into your life. So creating your sacred morning it's fun. You try to think, like, what can you do in your life to design in these things? I got a question of what's a resilience researcher. We'll tell you a little bit more about that. Let me show, I'm going to hop back to screen share so I can show some examples of how I bring this into my life. So every morning I do this practice. And then, fortunately, because of this yoga class that I'm in with Jean, we have a gratitude meditation as part of it, and like a 3-minute meditation. So no matter what, as long as I show up for the yoga class that I'm leading, I still benefit too. So every day we have a moment of gratitude. Every day we meditate, and it's just 3 minutes, but it changes the whole day. This is a really beautiful video that a friend of mine filmed that catches this kind of sense of sacred morning. So I'm going to put it in here, and it's actually talking about the idea of sacred space. And so it's really helpful not only to have a practice, but to actually create spaces in your home that are ready to go. You don't have to think about it. You get up and you go sit your butt on that pillow, you know, and you've got the pillow ready. You don't have to think about it. Or you get up, you get your tea, and you go sit on that pillow, and then you do your practice. Maybe it's reading 3 pages from the Bible if you're, you know, following Christianity. Maybe it's reading 3 pages from the Tao Te Ching. Maybe it's writing a journal. Maybe it's meditating. It can be any practice. It's your practice. So I just put that link into the chat so you can watch it later. But it's really beautiful, and I do find that sound is really helpful. So ringing the singing bowl 3 times before we start the practice, or 3 times. Creating a special playlist. First thing you do, you wake up, hit play. Gets you going. So this is this idea of bringing the sacred, or bringing this space into your morning so that you can practice. This is, I've started to bring it into my workplace, and I've been really amazed at how it's being received. So this is through the University of Hawaii. It's a 10-campus system, and I've been bringing in what's called the Lunch Break Mindfulness Series, and people are so excited about it. Basically, it's one for a half-hour of meditation and a half-hour of chair yoga in the middle of your workday. Everyone stops, we do this practice, and then we go back to our workday. And I think people are really stressed out at this time, just in general. So it's been totally welcomed and totally embraced, and people are like, oh, can you teach more? Oh, can we have more of these classes? So building in a lunch break pause. Maybe you go for a walk. Maybe it's just 5 minutes. 2 minutes can change everything. It's what's so profound about this work. So that's one thing that I've done, is I've brought it in that way. I also have a certificate in forest bathing called Shinrin-yoku. And this is, these are just some pictures from the Shinrin-yoku practice and some video resources. But I've also learned, I'm in the environmental climate change resilience field. We were having an event, and I said, hey, do you want me to guide forest bathing as part of the sustainability event? And everyone said yes. And now it's become the thing that we do every semester, and more people are going to it. I think because there's such a need for taking these moments of pause. But it's also really amazing. I have to tell you, it was a little bit of an edge for me I was nervous. I was like, ooh, are they going to want to do forest bathing at school? And yes, the answer is yes. So I'm going to put that one in the chat for you too, so you can read more about it. But having the courage to invite practices that work for you into your workspace so that you can be models for others, and it can reinforce your own practice, that's been amazingly powerful. And the more I do it, the more I'm just getting encouraged to do more of that. This is my work page at the University of Hawaii. It's Serene, the Center for Resilient Neighborhoods, and you wouldn't believe it, but they picked this name before I was hired. But there could not have been a better name for a center that I was going to be running. So CE, the Center, RE, Resilient, NE, Neighborhood. And so what I'm doing with all my resilience work is talking about staying serene in the eye of the storm, literally. And even though we focus on community resilience, I've brought in the intrapersonal, or our internal personal resilience, as part of that. And it has been tremendously powerful, and people are all about it. So now I get to be the resilience, researcher that also does mindfulness, and people are into it. It's been amazing. So that's an example of how I brought it into my workplace. And I think, yeah, like I said, it's kind of just compounding and growing on itself. Okay, so I'm part of a statistics seminar, an international statistics seminar focusing on a method called Q methodology. And I've brought in mindfulness into this space, and I feel like that is an achievement. So because I got to start this, I founded this seminar with a number of other people. And we spend the first 10 minutes doing what's called attention intention. The first 10 minutes, everybody on the call shares where their attention is at. And it's designed to bring us in but also to like create a community and to learn about each other. But because you basically say, where is my attention? Some people are their attention's on a research paper. Some is grading. Some is their child in the back, right? We get to learn about each other's lives, but then they say what their intention is for our time together, and suddenly it focuses the whole space together. So that's a form of mindfulness. Together, we're collectively setting our intention, and the entire container for the statistics conversation has been transformed. And people love it, and it's going really well. If anyone's curious about that attention intention icebreaker round, I can unpack it a little bit more, share later. It works so well. So that's something else. And then the last thing,
damn, does this fat motherfucker ever shut the fuck up?
this is probably one of these things. Do you guys want to?
Damn.
Do we got that covered to mute this person?
Miku, can you stop sharing for a second, please?
Yes.
All right. Jing, did you find him? There he is.
We're popping around.
I see him. All right, you can go on. Apologies about that, everyone.
That was a great example of of experience of the surprise or a hardship. You know, the first time that happened to me when I was teaching, I like had a panic attack. But but I've learned to just breathe through it. We'll take that unwelcome stimulus there as a moment to just call it stimulus, and take a moment to notice how your body is. How did your mind react when that just happened? Maybe you didn't notice. How is your breathing right now? So this is a good time to just take a moment to find a slow breath in through the nose. And slow breath out. Good, yeah, just notice. And that's where we have choice. Suddenly we have choice to notice how we react and how we respond when things unexpected happen. Good. All right, I just had one last little thing to share, and then I was going to do the meditation. I think I'll do that to buy us a little more time for reset of the body, mind, nervous system. So this last piece was Adventures with Dr. Miku. And Jean can tell you this is a little more challenging, but since I'm a field researcher and I go out into the woods, the last thing that I've tried to do is find a way to teach yoga from everywhere, really everywhere. So this is just some pictures of me out in the barn in the middle of my forest research station in Hilo, Hawaii. And basically wherever you have Zoom, you can set up these kind of spaces. And so I just decided to try to teach from out there. It was a little challenging with the Wi-Fi, but we adapted, and it was a lot of fun. So that's all I was going to share is you can bring your practice almost anywhere with determination, courage, and yeah, maybe a little, what do you say, a little bit of adventure and playfulness, because it's not always going to work the way you think. So yeah, so that's kind of the gist of what I wanted to share today. And I wanted to take some time to actually have this practice with each other. And then we'll open it up for questions and comments, reflections, things like that. So there's a lot more of you on here, but some of you at least were familiar with meditation. So the first thing that we'll do, first thing I always teach people to do is create their space, right? Maybe take a moment and notice your space around you. Maybe you want to turn the lights off. Maybe you have like little incense or candle. Like let yourself enjoy. Like take a moment. Yeah, however you need. Maybe find that pillow. It's just going to be 5 to 7 minutes, but it's worth it to set yourself up. Then what we'll do next, you have two options. You can just kind of relax. You can even lie down if you want to. Or you can take a more active posture with a nice tall spine. Then the next thing we'll do is you have an invitation. If it feels comfortable to you and safe for you, you can close your eyes. And we'll begin by focusing on the breath. So once again, let's find a slow, deep breath in. And a slow, deep breath out. Again, slow, deep inhalation in. And slow, deep exhalation out. You have the option to bring one hand onto the heart and one hand onto the belly if you want to try. And just notice the body breathing. You can feel the warmth of your palms on your body. Noticing as you breathe in how the body expands. You can feel the belly expanding, rib cage, maybe movement in the shoulders. And as you breathe out, the body softens and gentles. And then as you breathe, have the invitation here to invite your body to breathe as slowly as your body needs for nourishment, rest, and ease right now in this moment. You're inviting the body to breathe as slowly as your body needs. And still noticing that expansion and that softening. You have the option to bring both hands to the heart. And simply notice, can you feel your heart beating? Can you feel your heart beating? And it's okay if you can't. Many people can't. You can actually use your fingers and bring your fingers to your pulse. It's another way to just feel. Can you feel your heart beating, the blood beating in your body right now? Okay, and we'll have another invitation. Inviting your heart to beat as slowly and deeply as your body needs right now. Maybe noticing both the heart beating, the twin rhythm of your heart beating, and also the rhythm and sensation of the breath rising and falling in the body.
Miku, is every
So go ahead and stay in this meditation for a few more cycles of breath, and I'll sing for you with the flute. everyone. You can slowly begin to open the eyes. And we'll return. So that completes what I was planning to share with you. And I'd love to open up the space for reflections. What was that like? What did you experience? And any questions that you have.
So if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. So we'll just give it a couple minutes. While everybody's lining up, I want to thank you, Miku, for a wonderful discussion. I think some of the practices you gave, having tea, finding your favorite space, it was great. So thank you. I think some of those things I'll definitely take into account. And I love the simple fact that you said you only need 2 minutes, and it's just to bring yourself to center. And it really is important so you can get to your day. So thank you. That's just some of my takeaways, but other people are lined up. So I have Joe, Julie, and Sabrina.
Hi, Miku, thank you for joining us. I apologize, I was a little bit late, and I don't know if this was actually covered, but I would probably think that you might have an answer for it. One of the things that like practices like with meditation in conjunction with practices like tai chi, they actually help unblock energy throughout the body. And I was wondering, like, what are some of the conditions and circumstances as to how energy gets blocked in the first place? And because I know that it can result in illnesses. And I was actually speaking to somebody about this just yesterday, how imbalance actually can cause, in some cases, severe illnesses.
Oh, that's a good question. And I'm not primarily an energy practitioner. I have definitely had some training in it and some experience with it. So I'll share that off the bat. Tai Chi teachers specifically definitely work more with that, but I do have some experience with it. I mean, in some ways, you're kind of asking, so what are the conditions that we become imbalanced? In a way, the blocking of energy is simply that. And I know that's the word simple, but when I was speaking, I was talking about kind of wobbling and how do we learn to wobble better, as in like how do we learn to stay in our center better. We are constantly experiencing things that bring us out of our center, that bring us away from balance. And in every moment that we experience that, how we respond, either we line back up to become the clear channel. I almost said this earlier. My flute teacher taught us to become clear channels to allow spirit to move through us. In this case, it's song, but that applies to so many traditions and teachings. And then what happens is we experience a stimulant, something, a stressor. When we lose balance, if we don't come back into alignment, then we slowly create these types of blocks. It's kind of that simple in a way. And that block can manifest as in an emotional way also. Like some people, it comes out emotionally. I do teach a meditation of the different bodies. So you have your physical body, you have our energy body or the breath body, we have the emotional body, mental body, wisdom body, and then the Anandamaya kosha in the center, which is this light body. And any of those levels can experience blocks when they become imbalanced. So yeah, I think, and it can be anything, truly anything. So I don't know, it's not the most specific answer, but that's definitely what I would say is any condition where you feel that you leave your center, and then you don't respond in such a way that you are moving from the Tao, or you're moving from spirit, or moving from alignment, or moving from a clear channel, then the blockages begin to build up, and then they build up in one direction or the other. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, I have Julie, Sabrina, and Jing. Julie?
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I took a purpose discovery online program a year and a half ago, mostly because I felt out of touch with my inner GPS, and I'd been living in my head for such a long time that it wasn't the place to go when your parents died. There was no comfort there, there was no strength. And I believe it's because I shut down my intuitive part of me and hadn't used it for so long. And we did a lot of meditating in the program, and I had a difficult time with it because it was supposed to relax you, and I just got agitated and irritated. But I have found that when I run with music, with choral music, that to me is what relaxes me, and that's when new ideas come. And even when I was a baby and had colic, they had to drive me around in a car. So my question is, are there different modalities and things that work for different people to get them centered? And perhaps I didn't work through it long enough in meditating, and would you suggest continuing to persist with that?
That is such a good question, Julie. The answer is yes, absolutely. There are totally different modalities for every single person. And a lot of times we see more popular forms of meditation. For example, Zen meditation, just sit. They're so strict. I'm a non-traditional meditation teacher in that I do teach many different traditions. And even when I teach, the top thing that I try to support all my students in doing, we call it advanced disobedience. As in, listen to your own compass. The practice is actually about learning how to listen to that inner compass, that inner wisdom. And so maybe you're going to be doing something totally different than what everybody else is doing. But actually the practice of listening to what your body, mind, heart, spirit needs in that moment is the practice, at least from the space that I teach from. So absolutely, there are so many different styles. The Zen practice, for example, that so many people think of, where you're just in total stillness and you're just sitting and you're not moving. Many people have talked about that being a more masculine style of meditation. And that if you're drawn to like a more feminine style, there's probably going to be movement. There's probably going to be music, right? So that's definitely some of it. Is some of the practices that have been popularized are, well, they're just a result of the society valuing certain styles among others. That does not mean that they're the best for you. That said, it's really interesting when you do try a different style and you come across blocks. And so in the, like kind of what Joseph was talking about, energy blocks or things like that, I think that trying to focus on the practice that works for you is key, because that's going to give you the foundation that you need. But then once you have that, identifying blind spots, identifying challenges where there might be blocks, that is a space to continue to explore. So I would encourage you to keep trying to lean into the spaces that are challenging, because then that also creates the practice of resilience, where you learn how to navigate with those challenges, or you learn how to navigate with those failures. So it's like lesson upon lesson when you lean into those spaces. So definitely I would say to do both things. And then for Joseph's question, there was one other thing I forgot to mention that my teachers have said a huge part of energy blocks and imbalances that we often don't think about, but again, some of the people I work with are more like traditional indigenous teachers, are ancestral. So that is something to think about that I didn't name, but that some things that we're carrying or holding are actually from, not even from us, not even from our own life experiences, but things that we've inherited, and that it's kind of our lifetime to work through those things. I just wanted to name that because I had forgot to mention that earlier.
Thank you. Up next, I have Sabrina, Jing, and Laura.
Hello. So I used to meditate a lot before. Actually, I used to meditate 2 hours, which now I'm ashamed to say because I have a hard time now. And I'm trying to get back into it, but limited. since I have other things I'm doing. So I'm trying to figure out what could be a sweet spot where I'm actually doing mindful and insight meditation. So do it long enough that I get through that, but not so long, the 2 hours though, so that was by choice, but I don't know if you have any ideas about what could be
About,
done,
sorry, go ahead.
about the length of time that you think would be useful to reach those points.
It's a really good question. I'm sighing because I'm sighing because I'm like, I don't know. The answer's not jumping right to mind. It's also because I've heard a little bit of a debate, I suppose you could say, among different teachers of mine, which
Mhm.
is consistency every day being more important than length of time at any one time that you sit. Uh, that is something that I would kind of suggest. So trying to find a practice that's consistent. So if you can't consistently do 2 hours every day, that is a long sit. That's like very, very long. I mean, that's a long sit. You really can get benefits in 2 minutes, but you're not going to get that insight thing, right? Or at least
Right.
I don't. Maybe you will. I don't want to put that on anybody. It's totally possible, but it's not the same. A half-hour practice, I find, you're really starting to drop into that space. An hour practice, it gets interesting, right? Then we have depending on each person, the physicality of the body starts to play a different role the longer you sit. And then there's different kinds of lessons that come. So, something that's consistent that you can maintain, because once you have the pathways open, every time you sit down, it becomes faster to drop in deeper. So that's something I think I would encourage more than the length of time, is trying to find consistency in the practice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Up next, I have Jing, followed by Laura. If anyone else has any questions or comments for Miku, please type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom.
Yes, thank Miku for the great presentation. Yeah, I always want to do more meditation, and we actually did this mindfulness study too before at 5 to Living Idea. Somehow it just didn't. I didn't find a way to do it yet. I had this on my app, and I found I'm more the active type. So yoga, I'm taking yoga with you is kind of my meditation for now. But I really like the thing you mentioned about, have a cushion, write a diary, read a couple of pages. I think that sounds very good. Maybe I will try that. I was thinking about reading Daily Stoic because a lot of people recommend that. So maybe that's what I will try to start with. I think a lot of time we all live in our mind, like a lot of people here, we have a lot of study of different philosophy. And it's kind of, the reason we have this monthly meeting is how do we integrate the theory into a daily practice. I think a lot of time we were too excited living these ideas and then have such a big gap between the reality, what do we think, the philosophy we learn, and what we can do with it. And we try to bridge that gap. I think this mindfulness will actually help to do that. So I'd like to see what's your, how we bridge, bridge the gap between our mind, our body.
Wait, Jean, is that a question?
Yeah.
That is the question, right? But it's practice. It's just practice. Like practice, practice, practice. And like what I shared is it's been amazing to try to bring it into my workplace. Like, what if we had a culture that celebrated and reinforced this, and every Zoom meeting you were part of, they took the first 2 minutes to breathe together? What the heck? What would happen, and hey, and I have to tell you, like, it's not as odd as it seems, because I've gotten this reputation as the meditation person. I was just invited to join the subcommittee for sustainability, and the person was like, okay, we get to pick how we design our meetings. Does anyone have suggestions? And I totally suggested that. I said, hey, can we do a 2-minute meditation practice at every meeting? And everyone was excited. So I think in a way that's a little bit of a cheat, but it's not. Like, if you can design your life in such a way that reinforces this practice as much as you can, because we just need practice more and more. You know, this expression, neurons that fire together, wire together. The pathway, eventually, the easiest choice becomes the automatic choice for the body and the mind and the heart. And the one real key thing, though, is that, I mentioned it before, is practicing experiencing high difficult situations and practicing how you respond then. It's already hard enough when it's just you sitting down in your room by yourself. But that's not how most of life is. So my husband calls it extreme meditation. His experience with this was going on a flight that was, everyone thought the plane was going down. And that was a great test to see how he's been practicing meditation for longer than me. Years and years and years and years and years. And the plane was going down. People were screaming. People were panicking. People were throwing up. Like, it was in a crazy situation. And he said that he was just breathing. And he was just practicing being in his space of, he calls equipoise. So every moment is an opportunity to practice. And the difficult moments are the time you really get to practice. So that's all I would say.
Thank you. Up next, I have Laura, Joe, and Sabrina. Laura, are you there? And are you able to connect? When Laura's ready, we'll come back to her. So up next, I have Joe, followed by Sabrina.
Hi, yes. So one of the things that I was actually thinking about was how emotions play a role in our lives. And obviously that, we can fluctuate, and that could lead us to be out of balance as well. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on what are your feelings no pun intended, about emotions in general. Should we be more in a place where we're not feeling too high, not feeling too low kind of thing, or something like, is happiness seen as something to be frowned upon with this type of meditation, having a certain amount of consistency with our balance in our emotional lives? It seems to be important. So I was just curious to know what your feeling overall is about emotions.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, that's a really good question. Emotions are, you're going to hear different answers from different schools of thought on meditation. So, like Buddhism or other spaces, we have like the dispassionate observer. Advaita Vedanta, even more so. And I had moved through different feelings around this, depending on where I've been in my life. But the person that I did apprentice with, he had a really practical take on this. Often we talk about the ego, right? So people are familiar with this term ego, or negative ego, where you have the small self that has all of this suffering. And because of our suffering and the challenges that we experience, we show up in a way in the world that's maybe not, that can be selfish or harmful or manipulative, me, right? Trying to fulfill this big, deep hole, essentially. And my teacher has taught that that's, we call it the wounded self, the self that doesn't realize it has worthiness. So much of our emotional responses come from feelings of not belonging and feelings of shame, right? Those are underneath. And the wounded self emotions that we speak to are, let's see if I can get them, overwhelm, terror, rage, shame, and loneliness. These are like some of them big, big emotions that drive what sometimes we call the shadow self, or that maybe some of the worst sides of ourselves. And there's aspects of things like sadness, grief, there's anxiety when we experience these things, but when anxiety goes to overwhelm or grief goes to despair, that's when things get really challenging. And my really practical and awesome teacher, rather than throw out ego altogether, he says, we want to try to cultivate healthy ego for the time that we're living in society. And most of us are. It'd be different if we were trying to become enlightened masters and living in a, an ashram or something like that full time. But if we're kind of living in the everyday world, trying to live from what we would call the healing self is a really great goal. And the emotions that characterize the healing self are, first emotion, well, not just emotion, it's like a state of being that you need, is that calm. So remember I was saying we need to be in our parasympathetic nervous system. We need to be calm enough that we can then have choice around our emotions. So calm. Then the next one would be curious. Curiosity is really important so that we can look at the parts of ourselves. We can look at the shadow parts of ourselves, the emotions, the wounded self emotions that don't really tend to serve us or others. And we can invite those emotions into the next most positive state or the next story that's just a little more positive. Another sort of state around that is lighter, less serious, or humor. So even though, we've heard of gallows humor, but still it's inviting a little micro transformation of an experience of grief or suffering. Sometimes we need something. And so the healing self space is calm, curious, lighter, less serious, beginning to move towards the next most positive story of whatever that script is that's rolling around in our head. And then the beginning of what's called the access to knowingness, maybe just the very beginning of that. And then from that space, the emotions you experience from the healing self are really different than what you experience from the wounded self. Living life from this healing self space is the space that allows us to invite ourselves back into balance. And then it opens up to the next level, which is what we call compassionate or vibrant space, where you have access to vibrant, loving kindness, joy, childlike wonder, these like pure, innocent, these are emotional states. These are beautiful states, expansive states. And the important thing about accessing those emotional states is we don't access them without also honoring and acknowledging the shadow. So it's not an escape. Really often, sometimes say manic joy, we're really, really having fun because actually deep down we're super lonely and sad or something. And that emotion becomes the pathway to escape. When emotion becomes part of the full expression and experience of life, that's the one that we're going for, not the one that's the escape. So there's a whole lot more I could talk about for those things, but that's at least some of where I'm coming from with it. Yeah.
Joe, did you want to follow up?
Really briefly, I mean, we can come back to this, but I like what you said. It sounds like the idea is essentially to have emotions, but to have healthy emotions, meaning that you don't go from, you're allowed to grieve, but you don't go to despair. And then how that actually, I would maybe like come back around and see how that impacts not only you, but the relationships in your life a little bit later, maybe. But I'll let other people ask their questions.
Up next, I have Laura, followed by Sabrina.
I think I'm unmuted, right? Can you hear
You
me?
are.
I won't go into my personal stuff, but I think that I'd have to have a lot longer conversation with you regarding these issues and me personally. But when I was working with somebody, a cognitive psychologist, she hit on the point that said, find a place that you find peaceful and beautiful, that you can go to when you need to find calm in your life. And I have done that, you know. I was sitting in coming in very light, you know, little ripple onto the shore, back and forth, and it went up against the jetty. And I've been hooked on that space ever since. And every time I feel like I'm really spinning out of control, I go to the beach and I find peace, and I can sort of regroup myself the multiple things. Because unfortunately, I function right now at a really over the speed limit by a lot, you know, and I don't know how to slow that down. And it's probably it's a neurological thing, and it's physical, and I don't know that anybody knows how it can slow it down, you know, without using. I don't want to use drugs for that, but so it's just I don't know. I think we haven't gotten to figure out how to do that yet. I have not done yoga in the past because my spine, people say I really would not be able to do certain things, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. But anyway, that's where I am. And I don't, you know, it's sort of just a little piece of mindfulness, but it's been powerful for me. And I don't know if that would work for other people. It's kind of, you know, when you fall down and need that Band-Aid real fast, you know, it's just help for a little bit, and maybe that's something that you just need. So that's all.
Laura, thank you so much for sharing. That's why I became a Shinrin-yoku forest bathing guide. Because I grew up in Alaska, and nature is so powerful for helping people come back to that space of centeredness. That's
Yeah.
not true for everybody. My husband's not that way. Like people who are more city people, I learned. I was like, what? This doesn't work for everyone, but
Yeah.
and even just the memory, even if you don't get to go to if you have a physical place, even better, but even just to remember that place and how your body felt in that place can be so
Yeah, somebody to buy me a little place on the beach, you know, somewhere, and just put me there for or in the mountains somewhere. I'd be happy to sit in the mountains, but you know, my brain is sort of fried, I think, in some ways, and you know, trying to make it better, but it gets all very complicated and intertwined with health, and it's just hard to unravel, you know. I would say good luck to somebody with like things that you were talking about, these various levels and so forth. Because a lot of the stuff I deal with is out of my control all the time. So, and I don't think there's a way to humanly bring it back, but I'd love to talk to somebody who might know how to do that. I'm open to anything at this point. So if I write to you, you have some suggestions for me.
yeah, I'm sure Jean or we can get you my information to send me email.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Up next, I have Sabrina,
you.
followed. Yeah, up next, I have Sabrina, followed by Allison.
I just had another question about people that have never meditated and they want to meditate, but they have a hard time doing it. Like, what do you recommend for them? Even sitting, it could be an issue sometimes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so for beginning meditators, I definitely recommend a guided practice. So, and it can also help to be in a group, but sitting by yourself with no prompts or cues, and it's just you and your mind, that's really, really hard. And that can put people off immediately, and then they just give up. They're like, well, that was terrible. Unless they have a really good reason to try to keep doing it, you know? So for beginning meditators, having a guide, having someone to help reassure them that everything they're experiencing is normal. Like all of these, all of these emotions, and the emotions that have emotions, the chaos of the mind, those first few times, totally normal. And it's just really nice to have someone to reassure you and walk you through that. So that's one of the things that I would suggest is a guide or a sangha, a group. Trying to meditate on your own out of the blue with no experience can be, well, not that fun. And then you're just like, well, why would I do that? That doesn't seem fruitful. And it can sometimes take years of practice before insights can be possible for people, you know? So that's what I would say. Yeah. A sangha, a group, or a guide.
Thanks. Yeah, I know that it took me almost an entire year before I stopped falling asleep.
Yes. And you know, in my classes, when that happens, this still happens. I tell people that that's what they needed. That's what was most, you know, their body needed to receive it that way. But yeah, it's definitely a journey in so many different ways.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina. Up next, I have Allison, followed by Joe.
So I had an airplane story. I was on a flight for basically the last 24 hours and I lost my luggage. And I know it's nothing compared to like your husband worrying that the plane's gonna go down, but it's so frustrating. And my flight wound up taking me to, I don't know, from Europe to North Carolina. Then I had to stay in a hotel and then back here. But in the middle of the night in this cruddy hotel I had to pay for, I was completely freaked out about this luggage and couldn't sleep and was like, and so I do a lot of yoga. So I wasn't going to get up in the middle of the night and do yoga, but I just started doing deep breathing. And it did finally calm me down enough so I could sleep at least. And it's a weird thing because, you know, like, all right, well, if they never find it, you know, I'll buy new clothes. I mean, I'll deal with it. But it's just you've such a feeling of powerlessness. And I think that's when anxiety kicks in, when you feel like you're not in control of things. Like you want to feel like you're basically in control of your life. And it's a funny one. It's something that's not like a horrendous thing, like the plane going down, but yet it still is like maddening, you know? So, yeah.
So your question or your comment here, and also some things I've seen in the chat, it's really difficult to meditate when emotions are high, when the wounded self emotions are high, right? I have a good friend, he's been meditating his whole life and he refuses to meditate when he's angry. I have some specific techniques that work better for, like, you know, you call it activated self, right? When your body is in that fight flight. But it's just really, it's almost a different set of practices, I would say. I think that meditation is really helpful for creating that long-term foundation of the mind, body, heart going towards that more centered place, so that you even know what that centered place is like. It's really hard to find it when we're, you know, having an emergency. That's like master level, right? That's mastery, right? So trying to find centeredness or stillness when we're already kind of sort of at a baseline level of calm or normal, that's already very difficult. So when our emotions are running high, in a way that I think that's a totally different set of practices. And somebody, and I have some I could share, but someone was asking about, like, what do you do if you're stuck in overwhelm or despair? Or total anxiety, freak out. I lived in Alaska. We grew up in Alaska. There's a lot of bears there. Camping where there's animals that can eat you brings a level of anxiousness into every kind of camping trip. And so, yes, there's the slowing down of the breath. That one in particular, where you're inviting your breath to slow down and you're actually trying to feel your heartbeat and inviting your heart to slow down. That one actually works pretty well, but if you're literally trying to calm down from an almost panic attack, there's some other things. I might, maybe I could try to record a video or share those ones. But there's also something else that's really, really important to support the practice, which is, what would I call it? Transformational grief practices. Yeah. So transformational grief practices, or practices specifically designed to address trauma experiences, where my teachers told me trauma is experiences of feeling powerless. Any experience you have where you feel powerless will create some level of trauma. Now, you'll hear lots of different definitions, but I find that one to be very helpful. So yeah, there, you know, you probably have heard references to like The Body Keeps the Score, or different books like that. But for me, because I've worked with traditional teachers, I actually go a little bit different route. There's so many different things people do. And it's not necessarily meditation. It's its own thing, but I think it's equally important in supporting us in this life when we experience hardship. And that is, I follow traditional indigenous practices. So I'm part of a group, we do Sweat Lodge, and it's actually prayer and song and sweating and some things like that. And we work with the shadow self, and it's usually a traditional elder that has been trained in this and specializes in this and guides that. And that's what I do. That's what works really well for me. And I see that as a pretty separate but important supplemental space to meditation. It's its own series. I have a Zen priest that lives behind my house on the Big Island, and I'm like so happy because he's like in his 80s, and he's been ordained and been practicing in Japan for like 30 years. So I get to now ask him all kinds of questions about what the Zen tradition does, and they have very different approaches to it. Right? They're looking at the emotions and they're setting them aside. They're just going just to the light, just to stillness, just to oneness, over and over and over and over again. My teacher, because I think he's a psychiatrist also, and he dealt a lot with trauma, he was like, that's great, but what if you can't go to the light? What if you can't do that? And so that's where it's sort of some of these other practices kind of fill in the gaps for those moments. So, yeah.
Thank you, Allison. Up next, I have Joe, followed by James.
Yeah, it's actually interesting just to pick up on the what you were just saying there a moment ago. I mean, I've actually heard in certain circumstances that people that are in a depressive state actually may end up ruminating if they should start meditation, so that actually can be harmful in those particular instances. So you actually have to be in the right place in order to do it. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? And then
There's a whole field called trauma-informed meditation or trauma-informed practice now, and a lot of teachers are getting trained in that specifically because you're right. Actually, in some circumstances, now this is like more prominent in the United States. I don't know if you would find that if you went to practice in India in the same way, or in other places, or Soto Zen schools in Japan. But at least in the United States, there's a whole kind of different approach to trauma-informed practices, being cognizant that the people that are practicing may have experienced all kinds of challenges, just different kinds of harassment or just really horrible experiences in their lives, that even inviting them to close their eyes is destructive. So we have to be really careful about how we cue things. So yeah, and then negative mental rehearsal, over and over looping on the thing that, and further beating yourself up. And, the practice of meditation is to work with that. But again, I think there's a more recent movement, especially in the United States, to recognize that it's possible those practices could be more harmful.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'll ask a follow-up later.
Okay. Up next, I have James. And if anyone else would like to make a question or comment, you can either type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. James, followed by Joe. Oh, sorry, James, Will, and then Joe.
Hi, Miko. Starting a practice and sticking with it when it gets to be a slog, sometimes there comes a point where it gets to be that way. So I was wondering, you kind of need faith to keep going, or some morale of some kind. Morale is very important. Is there anything you can suggest? And I have ADHD, so it's very hard for me to stay consistent on anything. So can you give us a little bit in terms of keeping a practice going, some morale for that?
Yes, and James, I also have ADHD, so I can speak to that one real clearly. One of the most important things for me is a community. Having other people that you're doing with it is so helpful, so that we're not just alone in trying to keep these things up. And even though I'm the teacher for the yoga class, boy, does it get me up every day. I have to be there. So I've kind of, I call it forcing functions, so I've built in forcing functions to kind of keep me consistent, where there's other people trying to be accountable to, and other people that support me. So not just in that, but yeah, the community aspect is one of the biggest things. Then the other one, though, is aligning your practice with your inspiration or your gift. If you can make the link that the reason you're doing what you're doing is to support something, some calling that you have. And then part of the practice then becomes reflecting on what that is. That's another way to kind of stay motivated. And then the last one is, it's really useful to have, if you have a regular practice, to build in retreats to keep you motivated. And so like once a year or every other year, try to find some group of people that does kind of something what you do, and then go and fill up your cup so that you can keep on keeping on with your practice. So those are the three things I'd say.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, of course.
Where does one find a community? It's kind of tough,
Yeah, well, it depends on which practice you're interested in. I think Jess, you or someone had put into the chat recommendations. What's so cool about Zoom is you can find communities anywhere in the world these days, and it's really phenomenal. And so I was going to recommend Thich Nhat Hanh's style of meditation is like one of my very favorites. And I believe they have online practices in an online school, and you can actually connect to them. So even though, they're practicing across the world, that's a space that could be possible. And that's a Zen style, but he brings in compassion and also music and sound, and I really like that one. But yeah, I would say once you have clarity on the practice that you like, then try out different Sangha and see, or groups, and see if you like the facilitator, if you like the style. And you might not find it right away, but it's definitely worth trying to find that one. Right, Jean?
Thank you. Up next, I have Will, followed by Joe.
Thank you. Thanks, Miku. That was excellent. And I like what you said about trying to wobble less, because we're all wobbling emotionally right through the day. I've been practicing for a few years now, on and off. And my teacher studied in India and Tibetan. He's a Tibetan Buddhist, but he's also doing a PhD in psychology as well. So he sort of integrates the latest cognitive science with the traditional practices. And I also am right into Sam Harris, who's got the Waking Up app. And
Yep.
he just brings like the non-theological, pure essence of mindfulness. It's just so good. I think he's got about 25 million subscribers. And it reminds me that the Dalai Lama said, I think it was about 20 years ago, he got his sort of wise men together, his advisors, and he said, how can we bring the Eastern wisdom to the neurotic West? And as a result of that, mindfulness has really emerged, like everyone's doing it now. But if you go where the money is, top CEOs are doing it. They're bringing it into big corporations, and elite sportsmen are doing it as well, to just disassociate from the constant rumination of just in the prefrontal cortex where it all arises, and then the emotions follow from there. But when you can just realize that you don't have to be slave to the thoughts, and even the sense of self essentially is a construct, you know, like it sounds a bit woo-woo out there, oh, there's no self. But I mean, if you meditate, sometimes you get glimpses of that essentially it is just a story, a narration, an inner dialogue telling you who you are, what you like and what you don't like. But anyway, I've got PTSD and ADHD and OCD and like clinically diagnosed. Not the PTSD is not clinically diagnosed as such, but I know I've got it. But anyway, if it can work for me, it can work for anyone. And I think the essential thing is to just keep it simple. You know, I'm not for, you know, visualization or things like that. Just the raw, pure follow the breath. If you can just follow the breath, it can do absolute wonders if people would just do it. And they're starting to teach it in schools now. A friend of mine is a primary school teacher, and she said that they teach actually in a Catholic school, but they just give the kids like 5 minutes in the morning and in the afternoon of what they call quiet time. And they're just teaching them to just sit and follow their breath. And if we could all do that, the world would be a less crazy place, I think. So end of my little speech, and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Will. Yeah, thank you, Will. And what you just shared reminds me of a tip for Sabrina's friend or beginning meditators is that was one of the first practices I did. This is actually a really fun one you guys could all try, is you count your breath. And so the practice is breathe, and this one's a breath practice, but also to help you cultivate the observer. You breathe and you count the number of breaths that you have until you have a thought.
Yeah, which is like one.
Yeah, okay. And then you name it, you say thinking. You let it go. And then you start over.
Yeah.
And then you can actually do that for a really long period of time, especially if you're doing like laundry or other things, and just you start to become aware of that rhythm of the breath, of what that breath space feels like, and the observer at the same time. So I used that early on as I was beginning the practice, and that's so helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it's interesting to just sit for, you know, and just observe how hard it is to follow 10 breaths and give each breath your absolute attention. It's so hard to do, but that's a really excellent gateway into it, to just realize how locked into the mind we are. Yeah. Thanks
Definitely.
again.
You're welcome. And as to teaching it in schools, my sister has her kids in a school. It's a private school, but they've brought in mindfulness they are 6 years old. They are 6 years old, and every morning they have like children's mindfulness games. And they asked me to come teach meditation. I'd never taught meditation for children before, so I was like, sure, why not? So we did it, a circle of like 15 6-year-olds, and we had them practice breathing, see if they could feel their heart. But the one that really got them was the flute, and to try to listen and like listen as hard as they could to really hear it. And I would walk behind them so they could hear it moving. And part of that is just the practice of turning on the senses and activating all the senses, and help them focus. And there was this like golden moment where they were just quiet for like 1 whole minute, all 15 of them. And then it, went back to its normal thing. Yes, yeah, it's happening now more and more.
Thank you, Miku. Up next, I have Joe. And if anyone else has any questions or comments, please type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom.
Yeah, one of the other benefits of, and I was actually just talking to somebody about this, literally, and it was one of the benefits of meditation is that you get to understand yourself in that process. You know what is triggering to you, what emotions come up, why they come up, So there's an element of self-awareness that actually, that occurs over a period of time. It's one tool of many, but it is one. And I was wondering actually how you can, maybe you could speak to how that actually impacts the relationship that we have with other people. Because I think that is an important part of not only if we understand ourselves, our reactions are actually, we may be able to pause in between, the stimulus and the response, and have a more charitable response. And I also think that there's also an empathy that is actually developed as well, because when you're confronting yourself, you are also realizing that what other people may be going through. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that particular angle from when it comes to the importance of meditation.
Well, I do. I have thoughts. I'm glad you, this is so much fun. Yes. So, okay. So when we were talking about being in the healing self space, curiosity. So meditation is this practice in so many ways to me, of being able to be in the space of calm and choice, where we have an active observer observing ourselves and making these shifts to how we want to show up in the world. I'm not even talking like some of the people here, we're talking about source and truth and enlightenment. I'm actually presenting to you like a really practical aspect of meditation for kind of just everyday life. But if we're striving to live life from this healing self state with curiosity, we need curiosity to be able to look at ourselves and other people. We need curiosity to be empathetic. So many people are not curious. It's amazing. You think that they're asking questions and they're not actually curious. They don't really want to understand your worldview. They're asking the questions so that they can set up for the next thing that they're going to say, or because that's like the convention for how they're having the conversation. But really cultivating curiosity is part of this practice of mindfulness and meditation. And then when you are living in this healing self state, I think I mentioned at some point, neurons that fire together, wire together. Some of these things become automatic. This is the vision, is that we live from the space where our body is in a healing state all the time. That we live from a space of curiosity, even that we could live from a space of lighter, less serious, even with the most grievous hardships and challenges all around us. And then what happens there is then there's this other progression of things. So living from that space, we start to have the experience of worth, self-worth, worthiness, love for ourselves, and then love for others. They say, right, you can only love others as much as you love yourself. Maybe you've heard that. Like we can't love, if we carry hate or self-loathing, it comes out unconsciously in all these small ways. So loving of the self, kindness of the self. Then after that, an expression of, if you know that you have worth, self-worth, then we can hold boundaries with other people. So then suddenly we get to the next level. So then we have, sometimes my teacher used to say all these words, healthy, he called it healthy narcissism. And just to put that out there, that there could be a way of loving yourself, that loving yourself can be healthy from that space. And then from that space, healthy entitlement, that we have worth and that it's okay for us to be able to have joy, that we're entitled to experiences of joy. That could be, that's part of his philosophy, that like we're deserving of good things, to experience good things. Whether or not we get them, that's a whole other thing, but that we're deserving of it. Then we have our healthy boundary setting. And then there's this empathy piece that comes in. But there's a sort of individualization that kind of has to happen from the self side of things. For the empathy to be real empathy, to be really almost a pure empathy. And empathy being sometimes different than sympathy. where occasionally when we're commiserating with someone, we get dragged down into their emotion state. So empathy being one where you can hold their worldview and still hold the light that you're in or the balance that you're in, but still be able to meet them and support them. Then from there, after empathy, then comes altruism, right? So now we're starting to move into this space of we've got our needs met, we have enough, our cup is full, we're curious about ourselves and the others, maybe we're lighter, less serious, we're starting to heal some things, we have capacity, and we have this altruistic space. But it's not in altruism giving to others to fill my own cup. It's not in altruism because I need acknowledgement, I need recognition, I need something. That something is met at the first stage. That's the real altruism. Then the last step, this is how I was trained, is compassion. When we have met all of these different things and we really have practiced, then we become a clear channel for spirit to move through us and to be led by compassion. So that then the actions that we're experiencing in the world are actually supporting the greatest good for all beings. And we may not even understand how or why, but through it's led. And then we start to move into a space beyond words in that space, and then that is moving towards that Anandamaya Kosha, or the light body self, as you continue on that path. So that one gets a little hard to speak about, but yeah, that's the general progression of how this practice you do for yourself opens up and unfolds into all beings, actually.
Thank you, Miku. I just wanted to add a point before I go to Mike and then Jing. I love what you said in that last part about, the whole thing of loving yourself. And I think loving yourself, or love in general, encompasses all of those things that you mentioned, some of which were you mentioned altruism, compassion, and how all those things lead up to compassion. And I think it's compassion for others and compassion for yourself. Because when you practice all these things within yourself in a healthy way, like your teacher said, a healthy narcissism, you can give that out to others. And I think to me, that's the difference between healthy narcissism and just narcissism, right? Healthy narcissism, you give it to yourself first, and then you can spread it out to other people, because you can kind of look for what has that other person been through, and why is that other person acting the way they act. And when you love yourself first, you won't allow that other person to abuse you or to harm you. You will set up healthy boundaries. And I think that's so important as well in the conversation, is healthy boundaries, but you will still be able to have compassion for that person and love that person, even if you can't be around them. So thank you for that.
Yep, you got it, Ebonique.
Thank you. Up next, thank you for your patience, Mike. Mike, followed by Jing.
Sure. Thank you very much, Miku. Really enjoying this. My question is, if you don't mind, if you could talk a little bit about your transition from being a kid growing up in Alaska, where you're so close to nature, and now you're doing a Zoom call. And I know myself personally, my ability to concentrate over the years has been, I don't want to use the word decimated, but I'm close to using that word because of interaction with technology. So if you could just talk a little bit about that transfer from growing up in Alaska, where you've got your hands on everything, to dealing with social media, computers, etc.
Yeah, if I could show you my screen, this is something that one of the grandmothers I worked with taught, and thank you for that question. Yeah, okay, first of all, yeah, there was some culture shock. just in general, going from Alaska even to Washington. For those that don't know, yeah, Alaska's a land of the rising sun. Or, no, not rising sun, Japan. Midnight sun. It doesn't get dark there. In the summertime, it's light all year round. You can hike endlessly and never encounter another person. It is really, really, really wild still. And when I moved to Washington, I was so confused, why I needed a flashlight to go hiking in the summertime. Oh, if the sun goes down, and oh, you hike over that ridge and you get to another city and there's just people everywhere. And yeah, that was a big culture shock. But and you know, and honestly, my heart longed for the wildness of Alaska all throughout living in Washington, and so many places that people say are like so wild and beautiful and natural. I'm like, it does not feel that way for me. That's just part of what brought me to Hawaii, because I'm actually working in, of all the places, in an urban planning context, and that's not necessarily talk about callings, and that's a whole nother Zoom chat here, is to talk about calling and how sometimes we're called to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, but you just feel this calling, and that's how I'm here in Hawaii. But that's part of what brought me here, was the beautiful nature energy, the mana of Hawaii, even in Waikiki. So there is definitely some culture shock and some transition there. But what I was going to say is, if I had a camera and I could point it at my computer screen, this is something I learned from one of the grandmothers that I study with, and she's a Sami elder. This is Finnish reindeer people, like traditional people. And she taught me to put, well, let's see, we got some things to show you guys. Okay, we got, let's see. We got plants, we got this little starfish thing here, we got crystal, I got a candle, and I've got a wooden sculpture of a dolphin so even though we're on all this technology, I've put all of these, you know, I want to say gateways, little portals, just like how, who was saying, Laura was talking about that memory of that place. You know, these kind of things can be like that too. I put them all around my computer screen, so that everything, I even have, I have my little Kuan Yin here. They're right here in front of me, helping remind me where I came from, who I am, staying grounded, remembering to breathe. So that's one thing that I've learned from grandmothers and people I've taught with, is make this space filled with as much nature energy as possible. And then the other thing is, I think that partially just from a dedication to wanting to keep up my classes, I took on learning remote forest bathing, which is, I'm guiding people in the woods through my phone. And there's a lot of technology that had to go into learning how to do that. And even every morning when I teach yoga, I have like 5 buttons I have to click on Zoom to get the sound for when I play the flute, which is different for when I'm doing the whole rest of the class. And I think, again, this is just that practice thing. It was kind of awful. I have lots of peers that just gave up because it was so overwhelming, all this technology. But I think this is an example of like trying to find an edge and leaning into it. And I had a good reason. It was like kind of part of my calling. So I just learned, Mike, I just like kind of had to learn. And there is like a constant level of called cognitive load for being in a technology space. But breathing together, practicing more restorative practices through the technology, I think has created a separate map for my nervous system. So even though on one end there's a frequency that I don't enjoy, that there really, it on some level does not feel good for me, there's another foundation that has slowly emerged over time with many, many positive experiences where my body is in a little bit more of a resting state. So it just took time, and it wasn't easy, and it was awful in some times. And the Zoom bombing example, I was like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. I did so well. Like I was like, wow, that's the 3rd time this has happened to me. The first time was horrible. I did not respond well. None of my students knew, but inside I was like, I was so panicked. But when you're a mindfulness guide, you actually have to protect your students from these kind of things. So then the second time it happened, I was better. And then this time that it happened, I was like, huh, you know. Again, it is also partially practice. And some of it was really, really difficult. Yeah, like the first time I like called people up and cried, kind of thing. And there's a whole nother practice of meditating and being a mindfulness practitioner from being a meditation and mindfulness guide. There's like levels upon levels of other experiences of practice there. Anyway, Mike, thank you so much. That was a great question.
That was a great response. Thank you very much.
All right, so up next, I have Jing.
Yeah, thank you, Miku. So my question is, I think there's so many, I think it's so great you were able to learn so much from traditional culture. And every different culture seems have this path of spiritual growth. And I think it's unfortunate, current society, when you're not religious, you're kind of out on your own. Like people are trying to find their community. I found especially for me, I found 5 to Living Ideas, and I found your group and really helped me. But I see more for my kids, I see them when they don't really have a religion they can really believe in. I try to send them to the church, but because I'm not religious myself, none of them are religious and they don't like it at all. And I feel it's like there's so much lack of guidance and they're so easily distracted. I was listening to the All the Devil. I was like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. Devil control everybody, like drifting all the time. And the internet, YouTube is constant drifting. And I see this mindfulness will really help. But unfortunately, I really see there's a huge need for the young people, have certain kind of like groups, help them for this growth, either stoic for you, so meditation, mindfulness. They need this kind of like organization, like help them, because I know so many young girls I heard, I don't have girls, fortunately, they all have depression, they need a psychiatrist. And I think it's much, and one of my friends have to put her daughter on pills. And they're like, I don't think it's a good idea, but she doesn't think so either. But then there's a professional advice. I think it helps her. I just think for girls, they're more emotional connected and they're impact much more by the social media. I want to see what I really see this huge need, but I don't know where to start, how can I help them before it's too late, because they have this kind of habit of drifting, this internet, YouTube, constantly distracting, how to help them to be centered and find this. Yeah, I see it's badly needed.
I was looking in the chat of the chop wood carry water thing. You know what you had said, Jean, about movement. It's really difficult to come to a stillness practice, like where you're just a meditation practice, especially for younger people if they haven't been exposed to it. In my family, it was like family culture, not a lot when I was really young, but to meditate together. And we just grew up doing it, so it wasn't weird. It was just like part of culture. And my family wasn't religious. It was just something my mom had picked up. So that was one thing. If they're really small, it's something that you can do together. I also think yoga is really good to get youth into. I'm biased that way, but sometimes they can get into it because of the physicality, but then it becomes a gateway for the philosophy, becomes a gateway for more. So that's something, is trying to expose kids to these practices when they're younger. As some have said here, it is starting to happen in elementary school already, which is really great. But when they're already at a certain age, that gets difficult. And then I would say something like a kids camp or something like that, like a 1 week thing or a 2 week thing in the summer, where it's focused on a topic they like, but that the camp counselors, I don't know, bring in kind of like a healthier environment for them. And ideally, one where they don't have their phone for that week of camp, And so those are some things I think that are practical. And then you can like pick it with the child, but give them some like, if they kind of found it, right? Or they came up with a list of things they liked together with a child, but you're going to give them some constraints, like, okay, it has to have something educational, or it has to have something outdoors, and there needs to be something where they don't have their phone, but then they get to pick what kind of camp, then they can get more into it. So that's, I think, something that would work well when they're farther along. In my dream, and my husband and I are looking at adoption. We don't have children ourselves yet. I grew up in Alaska, so I know how powerful nature is. Like, oh my gosh, you know, if they can grow up with nature, it just changes everything. But most kids don't have access to that. So my dream is we just got like a cabin. So I grew up actually going to a cabin every summer with my dad. So that's the other kind of thing, is if you have access to a space where you go for family trips regularly that has to do with the outdoors, that will help. That will definitely help. And so, I mean, I'm a little biased, but if they're doing it while they're young enough, then the city country thing's not as big of a deal. So those are my thoughts on it now. Ask me in like 10 more years when I have like, I might have a different answer for you, but those are some of the suggestions I have now.
Yes, thank you. I do see nature really helps. Actually, I take my kids to ski. We just start sailing club, join the sailing club. And I think, you know, personal for me, just like my husband feel the same way, like just a few hours on the water and make the whole day just feel so much calmer than.
Totally.
Yeah,
And
my
if you do
kids still have his phone.
like, at least if you do seasonally too, like every summer you do a thing, or every winter you do a thing, and it becomes something they can look forward to, a little bit part of their life, you know? Yeah, it's helping them access that space, you know, whatever it is, but nature is so good for that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Jing. Up next, I have Joe.
No, I actually just want to extend, my gratitude for you joining us here tonight. And I completely agree with your last statement as well. I think, teaching meditation at a young age and being exposed to nature is actually, they're two of the most critical things to expose children to, because it's something that they start to see the benefits at a young age, and it starts to become almost part of their daily life. Whereas you, as an older person, in having gotten into yoga pretty intensely at one point, that you realize the benefits, and you realize how much, how much you can get out of it. But it's going through breaking old habits at that point too. So there's another element to it. So I think that was a fantastic answer. But I also, again, I want to extend my gratitude for your joining us here this evening. It's really been a wonderful meeting. So
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, get them while they're young. So that it's a habit, right? So that they have these habits that support them in their whole lives.
So if last chance, if anybody has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. While we're waiting, Miku, thank you so much for joining us. This was really great evening, especially for me, since I have a limited practice with mindfulness and yoga. I was one of those people that had problems paying attention, or I would fall asleep. But you gave us some very practical insight on this. And I'm going to have to really go back and really look at this video again. Thank goodness it's on my cloud. So, and for those that are new here, this will be posted up at 52 Living Ideas YouTube page. And so if you missed anything or you want to go back and look at it, you can go back and look at the recording. So, so thank you. And we do have a comment from Julie.
I just wondered if there was going to be a follow-up on your calling and purpose.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we will try to arrange one once we could have more time later. Definitely. I think that's very important, because when we have Design Your Life, actually they mentioned about different level of life meaning, and the highest level is purpose. I think a lot of people, like in the freedom, then there's the power and money, there's different level of like people and different. I think the calling is kind of on the purpose level, which is kind of highest level. So I think that's will definitely worth a whole night to discuss for discussion. And I also want to mention is, oh my God, I forgot what I was. I have this may come back to me.
Okay, Joe, you're unmuted, so
Yeah, I would actually just hope that you'd definitely come back and actually lead us through a second session. And that would be, we'd be most grateful for that, because I think that we're just scratching the surface and really understanding this. We had a meditation series about at the beginning of COVID, actually. So it was a meditation class. I think it was on Tuesday or Thursday nights, and it ran for, I think about 6 weeks. And so, but I think this is one of those more practical applications that we know here at 52 Living Ideas. And I mean, we've talked about it theoretically within the Bhagavad Gita. We've talked about it in terms of it slightly in terms of Taoism as well. So that these are things that we've thought about theoretically, and now these are how to actually put them into practice as tools for our everyday life. So yeah, very much appreciate that.
Yeah, now I remember what I want to say. Yeah, so basically, I actually sent my kids to the happiness program. It's don't know if you know Shri Shri, they have this whole meditation. And I was like, oh, I need to learn meditation. So I joined the program, sent my kids to the youth program. And unfortunately, I think what I learned is like, we can't really teach our kids what we don't know. A lot of time is actually the one reason I think the curiosity and the growth is like, we try to teach the things to our kids, then we have to learn it, like nutrition. They help us to grow so much. I really appreciate, in order to educate them, I have to learn myself, like psychology, nutrition, all the other stuff. And it's such a great journey. And I think the thing I found that Indian people have such a great tradition. They have this Shri Shri group, happiness program, and the kids learn yoga and meditation at very early age. Unfortunately, the group are mostly Indian. And like, it's very hard to fit in. I try to take my kids there, and we're the only few like the foreigners, and my kids didn't like, they like it, they didn't like it. Maybe I will try to get back to it, but just fun, like I need to learn myself in order to teach other people, teach my kids. And it's really a great thing for me to learn too. It's, I think, something on my, thing to do for this next couple of years.
Well, I'm not teaching. I took a little sabbatical, you could say, from the Still and Moving Center, but I'll probably be starting up again with Sunday morning meditations in Hawaii. And you guys actually could all come because they're free and it's on Zoom, right? So but I don't know about the timing for you all. So right now there's a 3-hour time difference at some point, depending. I don't know if that's going to stay fixed. It alternates between 2 and 3 hours depending on the, everything. But I teach at 8 a.m. Hawaii time, so it would be a little bit later for you guys. So yeah, 11 a.m. on Sundays. But the next series I think I'm going to do is one of my favorites, which was the Tao Te Ching. I love that meditation series. And kind of, Joe, sort of to what you're saying, my background is really experiential and really practical about everyday life. I can't really speak to like the philosophical aspects, but I can definitely speak to the experience of these things and guide that. And so for the Tao Te Ching meditation, it's so fun. So I am not a Taoist scholar, but I've been able to craft a beautiful practice. And what we do is we take one chapter at a time. So say we just do chapter 1. And then I've researched 35 or so different translations of the same chapter. And then we meditate and we sit with it, and you get to just like, it washes through you. Some translations people really love, others it doesn't resonate as much. And I don't know how to explain it, but it's the best way to like let it sink into your body. So it's not so much just in the head. And so that's probably the one that I'll do. It'll be like I usually teach 5-week or 6-week series. So we can make sure that invitation goes out to everybody. so that we could all sit together. It's a really fun one. And then if you've already had a little bit of exposure to the philosophy behind it, then yeah, then this is that next step of like, how do you really embody it and experience it?
Now, Miku, I have a question because I'm really interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
So will that be on your website or will?
Yeah. So that'll be through Still and Moving Center. If I was to just email like you and Jean, then could you send that out to this group? Is that like a way that
Yeah.
could be shared?
That'd be great. Yeah, I think we can do that because we actually, the 5-2 idea, we have studied Tao Te Ching for a long time. I think the whole year, maybe. We lead by Jason, who's from Taiwan originally. He's teaching a lot of different kind of Asian philosophy. And Tao Te Ching is something I personally really like. And I think Bhagavad Gita and Tao Te Ching is kind of two of the most favorite things I really enjoy. And I think there's a lot of to learn still. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can listen to the same chapter over and over and over and over and over and over again, and every time just get like a little bit more, It's so, I love that one. But yeah, I can send you, as soon as the registration link becomes available for it, I can send that to both, Evanique and Jean, and then you guys could sign up for it.
Yeah.
Great.
And we'll have to figure out how to get it too, because I think the only practical way would be to post it to this meetup page, which would be a past event at that point, but the organizers will figure that out.
Okay.
But thank you so much again, because I would love to take that. I would take time out of my Sunday mornings definitely to do that. So I think, especially since we did, like Jing said, we did a whole series. It was over a year. We studied the Tao Te Ching for over a year, and we had Jason Ping and Amon Green, and they're scholars in Tao Te Ching. So they went through more of the historical aspects. So I think this will bring definitely a more practical aspect to it. So thank you.
Wonderful. You can see
Okay,
the
so
sunshine. It's still bright here in Hawaii. It's still daytime.
all right, Joe, did you want to say something? I saw you unmuted.
I was just going to just speak to it a little bit, how this actually complements a lot of other things that we've actually practiced here as well. We just got done reading Seneca's letters, and as well as Stoicism, and it's really interesting to kind of experience and talk about how the Tao views nature and how Stoicism views nature. And there's this one that's just being with nature, and then there's one that's trying to explain nature and really understanding the nature of the world. So there's that distinction that's really, I think that's really been helpful for me personally, because I think understanding both is really important. I was wondering, actually ask if you now, have you done anything as far as studying the elements and our relationship to the elements? Because I had a very good conversation with somebody yesterday about this, and just how important, the yin and the yang imbalance, and how that actually, the elements themselves actually impact us, and the meaning of wood and metal within, that framework. But anyway, have you done any work with that?
I have, but not from like more of an East Asian tradition, but through traditional grandmother that I study with. And so I've actually guided, I think we called it the 5 elemental meditation through the Still Moving Center. It was one of our most popular practices. But yes, so I have, but through a different lineage, you could say. Yeah. So it was wood, air, water, fire. And then there was like
Earth as well.
It was earth, but then there was one that was also like stars. She went galactic.
Yeah, there is that. Yes. So there is, we were going over that a little bit yesterday as far as the cosmic aspect of it as well.
Yeah. So she brought that into it. I mean, my teacher, and I learned it I didn't learn it as a meditation. I learned it as a transformational experience practice. But then through really understanding it, then I created a light level meditation to drop into different aspects of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting. We were talking about ideas of early heaven and then late heaven as well. I don't know if you're familiar with all that, but yeah, it was a very, but it was all about essentially balance.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the concept of heaven was completely different than anything, in the East, or the West, but it was, yeah, it was really, it was interesting to see, even the way the people arrive at understanding, like their consciousness, anyway, it was interesting. So, so I don't know if there are any other comments or questions.
Yeah, I think
Ebony,
we're
or-
right on time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are right on time. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Miku. It's, I mean, I really look forward to seeing you again. I hope, well,
Yeah.
Well,
hopefully
we'll
here.
come, all right. So we'll come. I'll work with Jean and find a time to come back, and I'll bring my husband with me too, which he's really interesting, and he teaches the tai chi and has a little more energy things, but he has definitely some thoughts to contribute on the calling idea as well. So that would be a really fun conversation.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful. We'll plan that.
Yeah, we'll definitely plan that. I mean, I would love to have you back as many times as you want to come back. So, just let us know when you're available and we will make it work happen.
All right. And Jean like sees me almost every day. So it's easy to stay in touch. So
And thank you
Anybody
again.
anybody interested in yoga, join Miku's yoga class, and contact me. I can send you the link and time.
Thank you, Jing. So does anybody else have anything else that they want to say before we conclude? If not, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Again, it's much gratitude to you, Miku, and also thank you everyone for your participation tonight. So with that, everyone have a great evening.
thank you, everybody.
Aloha.
Aloha.